Okay, so we are going to play with painting in Photoshop. So we're going to try a couple of techniques. We're going to kind of do what I did down here, but we're going to start from the beginning. We're also going to play with how to add patterns and things like that. So we're just going to create a new document. Default Photoshop size is fine. You can make it a different size. It doesn't really matter too much for this. So I've got this picture over here on my desktop of a mango. You can paint a mango or an apple or a Fuji apple or an orange or whatever you'd like. But some simple kind of fruit is a great sort of subject for this. So I'm just going to drag this in here. I'm going to hit enter, and I think I need to rasterize this as well. It sort of automatically imports things as smart objects. So we're going to go ahead and rasterize that. That's just turning it into pixels. And I'm in my move tool, my move scale tool, and I'm going to go ahead and scale this down. So I'm using this as a reference. You can see it dropped it in here under that name, and I'm going to rename that layer reference, just so that I know what that is. And I'm going to go ahead and create another layer on top of that, just a regular normal layer. Now I want to have that over here as a reference. So the first thing I need the shape to paint, and there's a couple ways you can do this. I'm going to do it the way that I think is best. It gives you a nice outline, but it involves using vector tools, which can be a little confusing. You could just take your brush and use the pencil tool and kind of draw around it, but that gives you like not a great shape. The vector tool is going to give you the cleanest line. The easiest way to do this is actually just to duplicate the layer and literally paint right over it. But I want to give you guys some drawing tools to do that. So we're going to do that. So we're going to come here to our pen tool. We're going to hold on this. There's a regular pen tool. The regular pen tool is going to connect lines straight, and that's not what we want to do. So we're going to use, because this is a curved object, so we're going to use the curved pen tool. The freeform one is kind of like an auto curve pen tool, but I like to be able to control what I'm doing. So I'm going to use the curved pen tool. So every time I click, I get a new point, and I'm going to go ahead and zoom in on this. Remember, spacebar gives you the hand to move around, and Command or Control Plus will zoom in. So this gives me like a really good image here that I can play with. So I'm going to start right here with the pen tool, and every time I click, the pen tool lays down another little anchor point. And this is a vector tool, so this is like Photoshop thinking vectors inside of a raster program, so it can be a little confusing. And you don't need to have a million. You can see if you get too many points, you end up with wibbles you don't really want to have. But you can come back and edit these later, which is another reason why I like the pen tool. I'm a big fan of Illustrator and vector programs. There, right there, right there, and right there. One of the problems with the freeform pen tool is that or with the curved pen tool, is that it's giving you curves everywhere, and you don't necessarily want curves everywhere. These actually want to be probably straight lines. So I'm going to zoom in on that stuff there and show you a little trick with the pen tool. So if you come here, convert point. So these little blue anchor points basically have two modes. They have like straight mode and they have curve mode. So if I change that there, you see now that becomes like these become like right angles. So that is going to give me a better line. And then if you come down to this tool here, this little arrow tool, this is your path selection or direct selection tool. So if you're going to move or play, you'll notice like this layer that I created this shape in it looks different than the other layers, and that's because it's like it's a vector layer living inside this raster layer. And you can rasterize it and make it behave like all the other layers, but for right now I want it to retain some of its vector properties. And this is the tool that you need for dealing with vector properties. The path selection tool is going to behave almost identically to the move scale tool up here, but it's going to work for vectors. So if I wanted to, let's say, pick up this path that I've made and move it, I would have to use that tool. This tool doesn't do that with that, so I want that tool. The other thing I want to do is I want to come up here, and you see I've got a little white square with a red line. That means none, and this also means none. So I have no fill and no stroke, but I do want this to have a stroke, so I'm going to go ahead and give it a black stroke, and 1 pixel is fine. You can change the size of that, and it'll give you something crazy, but 1 pixel is fine. So there is my my outline there. Actually, I'm going to give this a fill because it's going to be easier for me to select it. So I'm just going to give it a white fill. You won't see any difference, but it'll allow me to select. When I select this, it'll select the area inside of it as opposed to just the line. Now, okay, so I've got my thing, and let's say that like I didn't like some of the lines on this thing. I wanted to edit them, so you can edit these points with this tool here. So if you click and hold and you go to the direct selection tool and you go up to one of your little squares and double click on it, now you're in this editing mode for these. And you can see each square, you can kind of drag it around, and it's going to have 2 handles too. Be careful when working with these. If you do something weird like this, you end up getting weird lines, and you can always just Command Z after that. But you can use this to kind of smooth some layers and do some, oh, see right there? You can't even tell, but I actually twisted that around and that got kind of weird. So you can use that to do something, and say like right here, This has got a weird bump in it that I don't actually want. If you come back to your pen tool, you can go to delete anchor point and just get rid of it. You can get rid of anything that's weird, and that will help you edit things better. So that's how I would recommend drawing outlines around something. You can also just make up an outline this way. That was weird. What I just did there was not good. There we go. Okay. And you can tweak that stuff forever, but that's going to be good enough. So this is a copy essentially of this mango, and I'm going to use that to select my shape. So the first thing I need to do, I'm going to create another layer, and I'm going to make myself like a little paint palette, because we're going to do this. The first thing we're going to do is a very, very painterly mango. The thing I want to do is I want to give myself a palette of colors to paint this with. So we've got this thing hanging out right here, and I want all the colors that I can find in this. So there's a lot of colors in this. That's kind of why I selected this, because it's not just red, even within just a red apple or something like that. And fair warning, I stole this tutorial off someone else, but I wanted to do things a little differently than he does and explain things in a little more detail than he does. So I'm going to go to my eyedropper tool, which is this one here, but you can also just get there by pressing I. See, it says I. If you just press I, that'll take you to your eyedropper tool. And I'm going to pick up some colors off of this. I'm going to go into my brush tool, and so I hit B there to get that color down. And then I'm going to go back to my eyedropper, and I'm going to select maybe like this color here, go back to my brush tool, and I'm going to lay that in there. Maybe there's like another pink up here that I want. And then like there's like a yellow down here. I want to make sure it's nice and light. I like that one better. Bring that up here a little bit lighter. Brush, and I'm going to paint that one down. And then I want like a green that's in here as well. So I'm going to come down here and get like a nice green. And you can tweak these a little bit. Sometimes I think the color the eyedropper picks up, it's better for me just to select a color. All right, I've got some colors there that are pretty nice. And let's come over here too and select like maybe 2 colors from the stem. Eyedropper, select, brush, zoom out, pan, and we get those 2 colors there. All right, now we're going to use a tool. This is a great tool for painting. It's very similar to the smudge tool here. So what I'm going to show you both and kind of try to explain the difference between the two. They're very similar, but they work slightly differently in the Photoshop brain. What smudge tool does is it takes the paint and drags it in whatever direction that you start from. So you see if I start in the color and pull down, it drags it that way. And if I start in the color and pull down, it drags it that way. And if I start in the white and pull back, it drags it back. And that's what the smudge tool does. And you can use that to kind of blend colors into each other. But if you want to blend colors into each other, I recommend using the mixer brush, which is just sort of a more sophisticated version of it. But the mixer brush has a sort of sample color that it starts with. So right now it's in this dark brown. But if you just hit Option, it'll sample kind of where you are. So it's sampled this area right here. So I can then drag this color into this color. And you see how that just kind of blends them beautifully? And I can sample this color and blend it into that thing. And I'm pressing Option or Alt to sample the colors. So drag this one into that one, and then Option, and then drag this one into that one. And you can kind of blend like that to get a blend between them. So what we're giving ourselves here is like a little like a paint palette. We're mixing between the colors. And then I can use this to pick the colors that I want to paint into here. And as a reminder, use those brackets to increase the size of your brush. Option, sample that, pull that one into that one. And to really get the difference in the feel for the difference between the smudge tool and the mixer brush, I just recommend playing with them a little bit. The other great thing about the mixer brush is you get a lot of options up here, and you can play with these to kind of see how they affect what you're doing. A lot more control with the mixer brush. So drag it in there, and then make sure I sample the right color here, and pull that one into there. So that gives me pretty much all the colors that are in my mango to work with. And now I want to go ahead and start painting this, and I'm just reminding myself where that shape is. Okay, so I'm going to pull this up here on top of that paint palette. So we'll name this layer reference colors. Name it palette or whatever. It's just a good idea. And this is my mango line, and this is going to be our base color. So we're going to lay in some base colors in this area right here using this palette right here. Now, the first thing you want to do is actually go into mango line. Your mango line layer, and you select one of these. You can use the object selection or the quick selection, either one should work fine. And I'm going to select it, and it's going to kind of think about it for a second. It's automatically going to select that shape. Now when I come up here and paint, let's just go into a giant brush. Let me show you why you want to do that. Now it's only going to paint inside that line. And we have a nice clean line that we made with the vector tool, so that is why we did that. Now I'm gonna go ahead and paint using my mixer brush as well. It's a little easy to sample because I don't have to go switch tools in my eyedropper. I can just sample the colors from my mixing palette. I'm gonna zoom in a little bit. And a little bit smaller on the brush, okay. I go to my eraser and erase all that because the mixer brush doesn't lay things on top of each other very well. All right, so I'm using this as a guide and I've got this like red color here selected. I've got that red color here selected. I don't know why that's not working. Did the nail go away? Oh, that's why. Okay, so this is an important thing to know. I am in a layer that has nothing in it. I want to sample colors from this layer, so I need to come up here and click Sample All Layers. And now when I do that, I should get, yeah, I get the color I want there. So I'm just gonna go in with my regular brush tool and block some colors in, and then I'll use the mixer brush to kind of blend some of these back together. I'm just using a soft brush, but you see, because I'm only painting in the selected area, it's given me a lot of good options. I'm gonna go back and try to use the mixer brush now. Nope, not working. So I'm just using the paintbrush here to just kind of blob in where the colors kind of are. And I'm using my eyedropper to sort of select the colors that I want to be painting with. And there's some of this color, this like orange color in here. And there's a lot more going on in here than this layer is going to tell. This is just to get some base colors going. But you can see that because I've only got that area selected, even when I paint outside of it, it keeps that line nice and clean. I'm going to paint some of this highlight right here. All right, now I'm going to go into my mixer brush and I'm going to just sample where I want to be working, make it a little smaller. You can just kind of drag these colors around until they look something like what you want them to look like. And we're going to add a lot more to this, so this doesn't have to be perfect. This is just giving you a nice kind of wet blend to start with, just like in watercolor. And I'm clicking a lot. I'm not using one long continuous stroke here. One long continuous stroke will do things like that, which may be something you want, maybe something you don't want. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with that. I'm going to go ahead and paint the stem here, though. I'm going to go back to my regular brush. I'm going to zoom in. And this might be something where you want the hard edge. Remember, if you just shift bracket, it'll make your edge hard. And then I want like a dark brown color. I know I have it over there, but it's easier just to pick it. Mixer brush. Mix these two together. Okay, here's my little stem. We can add a highlight or something to that later. Okay, so now my mango's there, and I can go ahead and deselect it. You can sort of see it's a nice kind of clean mango shape. I'm going to keep it selected though, because that's just going to keep all of my lines where I want them to be. So I'm going to keep this selected the whole time. So I'm only basically going to be able to paint the mango from here on out. So I'm going to add another layer here. I'm happy with that as a kind of a base paint layer, but you see there's all this wonderful like texture in here. So I'm going to make one layer of like splotchy texture that's like the colors mixing, and then I'm going to make one layer of texture that's like these little freckly pock marks all over the whole thing. So we're going to layer this one color texture or color text, whatever you want. And I'm going to show you some ways to do that. So these are just different ways of blending other than like the blending brush. It's more ways of painting. So what I need here is I need a brush that's got some really nice texture to it. This is one of the places where Photoshop is really, really powerful. You have like a limitless number of brushes that you can use however you want. So we're going to just pop this open, and I got my brush panel here. I actually have it here, but if you don't have it here, just go into Window and go into Brushes, and you can drag it into this thing and have it there all the time. And so if I want to collapse it, it's gone. Comes back. Brushes and brush settings. So I'm going to go into brush settings. I need to be in a brush tool though, and I'm going to go regular brush. Okay, so here are all my brush settings. So here are all the different shapes that Photoshop just has in its little memory bank of texture. So you want to just kind of go through these and find one that makes like a splashy texture. Like look right here where the green and the red meet, like that splashy texture. We're looking for something that kind of looks like that. So maybe it's, and these ones here will have hard edges, so you want something that's kind of like an irregular shape like this. Maybe that is a good one to try. I kind of like that. That's cool. And I can make it bigger or smaller. Yeah, I like that. All right, to give myself the shape that I want. All right, I obviously don't want it in that color. So I'm gonna collapse that. I've got a brush I like. I can make it bigger, smaller with my brackets. And you can see the size of it changing up there. So I want to go ahead and sample that color there, go back to my brush tool, and I've got that going on there. Now, that's a little harsh, right? So maybe there's several different ways you can do this. You can put this whole layer in a blending mode, but I'm just gonna or you can actually change the opacity of the whole layer too. But I'm just gonna run the opacity of the brush down to not very much. And I like that. But you need to get it kind of with every color. And as you kind of overlap them, it sort of looks a little better. You can come in here too, like with a darker color. And if you drag this around, it gets all smushy, so I'm just single clicking on any of these. So something like that. Now we're starting to have the texture that this mango has. However, this is all just a bit much. So one of the things you can do is you can come over here and play with your blending modes and see what they look like. I have a feeling that none of these are going to look that good, but some of those could be a way to play with it. But what I actually recommend doing here, I'm going to run the opacity of this layer down just a little bit, the whole layer, maybe about there. And then I find some of these lines just a little bit harsh. So one of the easiest ways to kind of soften up the brush strokes there is just to go into filter and give this whole layer a Gaussian blur. That's too much of a blur. So something like 2 or 3 pixels kind of softens it up there. And we've got something that we like a little bit better. And you could always come in here too with an eraser in any place, eraser, and like soften up something like that. Now, obviously you would not want to have your eraser set on that way. You'd want to have, see your eraser's got a hard edge. You can also just run instead of using the shift bracket, you can run the softness down like that. And you can see that kind of takes away some of that if it's too much for you. All right, so pretty happy with that. We're getting a nice little textured mango going on now. Now we want to give it these little pockmarks. So we're going to do that in another layer. We're going to add a layer. We're going to call this layer freckles. And if you zoom in on the thing, on the mango, you'll see you've got some freckles that are like really kind of a light yellow color, but then when you get the red part, they're kind of a pink color. So we're going to do 2 different versions of the freckles. The first thing I want to do is I want to find the brush that's going to make the right freckles for me. So we're going to go back into this brush palette here. Make sure you're in your brush tool or it won't let you do it. And you need to find one of these like little scatter brushes that's going to work for you. You can see that. That's about right. But maybe needs to be a little bit bigger. You can see right here, it's giving me red freckles, which is not what I want, but I like the size and general shape of those freckles. So we're going to go with those. So I like that. Collapse my brush palette. Now I'm going to go with my eyedropper into my mango, and I'm going to pick up, you can go all the way down to the pixel level. You can pick, do you want this greeny one, this orangey one, or we're going to pick this greeny color. But you can see all those 4 colors, even in every freckle, there's different colors. So go back to brush, and now I got that kind of set up. So you can see now I'm painting these freckles, and you can kind of, you do that, you get big streaks. So you want to click individually, and if you want them to be a little bit bigger, you can do that. Or you can find, you know what, that color's not bright enough, not showing up enough. Maybe that's a little bit better. Nope, don't drag. Drag the brush, it gets streaky. And you can also do, like, if you look here around the edges, the dots get more concentrated. So you can shrink the brush a little bit and like click a lot. Don't drag, don't be like me. Dragging. And I'm gonna blend, oh, I'm dragging. Blend these pink dots, or these yellow dots, into the red area a little bit. And then I'm going to switch to pink dots. Thanks, Angie. So same brush size, I'm just going to come over here And with my eyedropper, I'm going to sample that nice light pink color there. I'm going to make it a little bit lighter. There, my color picker, just to make sure it shows. And I'm going to come back over here, back to my brush, and put those dots in. You can make your own brushes in Photoshop. You can save, like find a brush you really like and save it. You can also download like infinite number of brushes. So many people have made them. So those are all things you can find. All right, so that's looking pretty good. One of the things you'll notice though is like each of these little spots, they're all a little smaller than mine, that's okay. But they've got kind of like a dark little drop shadow ring around them. And that kind of makes it look like it's sitting into the mango a little bit more, where mine just look like they're sort of sprayed on top. So one of the ways you can do that is actually give this whole layer, because it's sitting in its whole layer, we can do all kinds of things to it. We're gonna give this layer a style. We're gonna give it a outer, we're gonna give it a drop shadow. And you come over here and you can see what that did. So we can change all these little features in here, and you can zoom in to see what that layer style is doing. So you can turn preview on and off. You can sort of see what it's doing. I actually don't like what that's doing at all. Let's see here. Maybe bring the opacity down. Distance, let's give it just a little bit of distance there. Maybe 2 pixels of distance. You can play with the size of it too. That's starting to do what I want there. Okay, so that you can see what that does. It kind of like helps the dots look like they're sitting in the thing. By the way, I have no idea what I did to get so many notifications from the Daily Mail. It's not my favorite news source. I just haven't stopped getting them. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with that. It's not perfect. You can keep tweaking it, but those are the general steps you want to go with, and the colors are pretty good match there. But I'm going to show you how I do shading as well. There's some highlights that I've kind of already painted on here, but we're going to punch those up and we're going to give it some little shadows, and we're going to give it a shadow on the ground as well. So we're going to create another layer. We're going to call this one shadow, or shade, whatever you want to call it. Shadows. Okay, and we're going to set this layer blending style to multiply. And the cool thing about that is even if you're in like this color, let's make sure I got my brush set as something I want. Come back to my brush settings and just like a regular brush. There we go. Even if it's the same color, see, it starts to make a shadow. That's just that same color, but because it's set to multiply, it makes a shadow. So if you just use like a nice soft brush, you can paint some shadows into here really quickly and easily and very realistically. Get that done. You can also use it to burn some spots that are darker. That's a little too much. I'm using my eraser to run that opacity down. Okay, brush. Okay, happy with that. I'm going to lighten up some of the stuff I did up here. These little shadows around here, they're a little harsh. Okay, now we're going to create one more layer, and we're going to call this layer highlight. And we're going to set this blend mode to screen. I'm going to go back to my brush, take my eyedropper tool. Same brush works well for this. And you can just kind of... The reason I like putting these layers on blend modes is that they don't erase. They're behaving based on some things they see underneath them. So when I paint over them, none of the detail and the texture that I've underpainted goes away. I think that's a little much right there. So that's from the underpainting. And I'm just using my eraser to kind of soften that. You can also run the opacity of that layer down. So there is my mango. I'm going to go ahead and deselect it now. And I can pick him up, and it's only selected that. Anyway, I've got my mango there all done, and you can group all these layers that you've made, your mango line, all these layers together, so that when you move that around, because right now if I were to move this, it would just move whatever layer I'm in. That just move the color texture layer around. So that's my mango. Now the next thing I want to teach you to do is, we have to add a drop shadow to this. So we're going to add this little shadow so it looks like it's actually living somewhere. So we're going to come down here, underneath my base color. It can be above the mango line, but somewhere underneath here, we're going to add a new layer. I'm also sitting here. You can always also move the layers around once you've created them. So this is going to be shadow. We'll call it floor shadow because I think I already have one. All right, floor shadow. And what we're gonna do here is just gonna take our brush, regular brush, gonna go to some dark color, and we're just gonna paint. And the opacity of this brush is set to 36, which is why it's not like crazy dark. Boop, boop. Make sure it's nice and dark underneath there. You don't have to be perfect with this. You can come through with your eraser after this and like kind of shape it a little bit. And then you can also take this whole layer and use our favorite filter, the Gaussian blur, right there. Oh, that applies just the last one I did. All right, blur, Gaussian blur. You might want a lot of pixels on this one. This one can be really blurry, like 10 pixels, 20 pixels. That looks pretty good. That's what the filter is doing. Okay. So now we've got a real mango and then our painted mango, and that's pretty good. We're pretty happy with that. All right, now I want to talk about working with patterns and manipulating patterns. This isn't particularly helpful for painting mangoes, but you're going to be doing this on your final painting project, whether it's a scenic wall or the costume. You're going to need to know how to paint with some patterns. And there's lots of different ways to do this, but basically Photoshop comes embedded with a way to understand patterns. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take the mango line, I'm going to duplicate that layer. I'm going to want to copy. We're going to take that up towards the top. And we're going to take all the other layers. And I'm using the Command key to select multiple layers. Mango line. I'll leave reference and reference colors in their own layer. So that's all the stuff that we use to paint that mango. You can see mango line sitting above it right now, so that's why it's that. I am going to right click on these layers and I'm going to create a group from those layers, and we're going to call that painted mango. Okay, and now you can see in my layer palette over here, everything is sitting in there, and I forgot to put my highlight in there, but you can just drop it in there. In there. Sorry. And then within here, you can move things around too. So it's just a way to organize layers because you end up with like hundreds of layers and you don't want to do that. All right, we can just turn that off. We don't need to deal with that right now. All right, so we're gonna come here to mango line, and we've got our lovely little mango line. Now we're gonna learn how to kind of put a texture or a pattern in here. And I've selected this pattern over here. So you can download any pattern anywhere online. Just find an image of the pattern you like, whether it's a fabric pattern or wallpaper or any kind of repeatable pattern. If it's not repeatable, it'll have lines between the tiles. And I actually purposely selected this one because it's not properly clipped. So the easiest way to do this, I just drop this in, and if you drop it up there, you get a whole separate image. So this is the pattern that we're going to recreate. We want to tell Photoshop to like that this is a pattern that it knows and remembers, and it can fill any kind of object or like a whole background, or you can use a stamp tool with this pattern. There's lots of ways that Photoshop understands patterns. But you'll notice that I actually don't have a perfect repeat. If you go from here to here, this top of this little clover should actually be right there. So we need to crop this so that we get a nice repeat. So from here to here, we're in the middle of that square over here. So we need to be in the middle of that square over here. So we're going to zoom in so we can see really clearly what we're doing. Take that to there. We got a nice repeat there. And then here, we need to be like around here. So now when this tiles, it'll actually repeat. That'll go from there. No, this needs to come like here. There we go. So there's our nice little repeat. We're going to enter, and that has now cropped that to a nice repeat. Now we're going to go to edit, and we're going to say define pattern. And in Photoshop, we'll remember this as happy pattern, whatever you name it, it'll remember it as that. And you think, how do I get to that? Well, let's show you. All right. So let's say we want to paint. There's a couple ways you do this. You can actually just select the object and fill it with that color using the paint bucket. If you select the object, the paint bucket will fill the object. If there's no object selected, it'll select the whole, it'll fill the whole thing. But I also want to play with warping and transforming this. So we're going to use a different method. We're going to use the layer fill, and we're just going to erase it. So we're going to go to layer. We're going to create a new fill layer and a pattern. The other advantage of doing this is that you can scale this pattern. Like, let's say that you didn't think that way, you thought that was too big, so you could run the scale of it down, or you thought it was too small, you could run the scale of it up. Any way you want. And the reason that shape is sitting there is because that layer, that mango line copy, is sitting on top of it. Okay, so we like that. Yep. We're gonna leave it at that scale. That's fine. But doing a layer fill, by the way, is the only way I know to scale the pattern. Other ways that you put the pattern in, it does not allow you to scale it. Okay, so if you click off mango line, you can see it's basically everywhere. And we're just going to erase, we're gonna go ahead and rasterize it. Yep, okay. We're gonna go ahead and erase. The opacity of my eraser is at 16%. Come on. Okay, we're gonna erase everything here. And I don't really want this stuff on, it's confusing me. We're gonna leave a little bit around it. and we'll make a cleaner line later, but this is just kind of a way to start with it. And if we come here and we put this layer on multiply, you can see now we just have a line, and you can see that in there. All right, so we're gonna come back down to our pattern fill layer, and we're gonna edit, transform, warp. And that allows us, we're gonna get all these wonderful lines that we can, these handlebars that we can use to kind of make it maybe look like this is going around that it's like a spherical shape. So if you were trying to do this with fabric and you wanted the fabric to look like it was kind of moving, you can use something like this. There's different ways to do this. This may not be the most efficient way to do it. To kind of warp the pattern around your object. And learning how to manipulate these handlebars is a little tricky. All right, that's good enough. Okay. All right, so now we've got that, and if it's a little bit small, we can just transform it up a little bit bigger so that it fills that whole space. That's nice, we like that. All right, we're gonna go to Mango Line Copy, and we are going to, let's turn this layer off for a second, just so that this will select that. Phil enjoyed his lunch, so that's great, bye. So we'll select that, now we'll come back, back into the pattern fill now. So we've selected this whole area. We're actually going to go up to select, and we're going to select the inverse now. So all the area outside the mango is selected. Take our eraser. Go ahead and rasterize it. We should be able to erase this. I don't know why we can't. Oh, because we're in the mango. Need to be here. There we go. And now we have a shape that's filled with a pattern. And now this would be useful again if you were going to do like a dress or something like that. You've got a pattern that's kind of warped to the shape, and you can do that a little bit better too. You can use that warp transform like multiple times to get it to curve more, to get those lines to curve more. But that's an example of how you make a pattern, fill something with a pattern. Obviously, if you're doing a wall, you wouldn't need to do all that warping. And now you can basically treat this whole thing the same way you did everything else. So you could create this layer, put it on multiply, and then you could start painting shadows on it, just like you did with everything else. So that is your tutorial. So for your homework, I want you to create one painted fruit and then one patterned fruit. So this is just kind of an exercise to show you how those things are done. If you want them all to show up in the same document together, what you would do is you've got that layer, there's nothing in it. These two layers are the pattern fill. So there's a couple things you can do. You can group them. I'm just going to merge them together. So layer mask. Okay, that's fine. Now this is all together, so I can move it as one layer. So I'm going to move this over here. 3D locus, you don't need that for this. And I'm going to turn my painted mango back on. All right, so turn in something like this for your homework, and that is what I want you to do. Go ahead actually and give me your reference photo in that. So something like this, where I've got your reference, your painted version, and your pattern version.